Hello there! So a couple of VEDAs ago I made muffins and I showed you how to make them and what I was doing, but what I didn't tell you was why I was making muffins and why I wanted to make muffins in the first place. So I was talking with my intern boss who had a little cousin who was turning maybe 5 for his birthday, and she wanted book recommendations for her 5-year-old. And I recommended If You Give a Moose a Muffin, which is one of my favorite children's books. And then when I was thinking about that book, I just got a big craving for muffins, so that's why I started making them. So today I thought that I would talk about my 2 favorite children's books growing up. So I went back to my house last week and I asked my mom about the books because she keeps everything, and she managed to find both of them, which was really cool. So the first one, like I said, is If You Give a Moose a Muffin. And this book is part of a series. So the first one that was really popular is If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And then they did If You Give a Moose a Muffin. And then there are a ton of other ones. So I was trying to think of why this was one of my favorite children's books and why it particularly stuck with me and why I somehow remembered it many years later. And I have to say, it's really just the part about muffins. So I have this strange thing where I just really like descriptions of like breakfast food. So the book starts out, if you give a moose a muffin, he'll want some jam to go with it. So you'll bring out some of your mother's homemade blackberry jam, and when he's finished eating the muffin, he'll want another and another and another. When they're all gone, he'll ask you to make more. You'll have to go to the store to get some muffin mix. The rest of it is just kind of all this crazy stuff that happens when you bring a moose into your house and the moose really wants to do a ton of stuff, and then you have to entertain the moose. And none of that really was of interest to me, but it was just kind of like the first couple pages that I really liked, because I would think like, oh, muffins, I really like muffins, and then like he'll want jam to go with it, like, ooh, I really like jam, and like, oh, you'll have to go get muffin mix. And there's just something about muffins and the mentioning of jam and the mentioning of muffin mix that made me really happy as a child. And I was like, I love muffins and I love baking and I really like this book. I've noticed the same thing when it comes to Dickens novels. So whenever I'm reading Dickens, there are little lines that he has where one of his characters is crying and he says, my tears fell into my bread and butter. And then there's just something about that phrase, bread and butter, when I'm reading it on a page that I really have this heartwarming feeling about. Or when he's talking about their brunch and then they have tea cookies and tea. And there's just something that I really like about simple descriptions of breakfast food, it seems like. So that was the main reason I think that I liked this book, and this was the original reason why I wanted to make muffins. Now this next book is very different from If You Give a Moose a Muffin, and in fact when I was talking to my mom about trying to find the book, she was a little startled and she said that she might have thrown it away because she personally didn't like that book because she thought it was weird and creepy. But I really liked this book. And maybe it's because it was weird and creepy that I really enjoyed it. So the next book is a book that I'm very interested to see if any of you guys read when you were little, but it is a book about a pirate kitty, and its name is Whiffle Squeek. So this book, like my mom said, is pretty creepy, but it's actually really imaginative. So basically it's about a pirate cat, and he has all this weird stuff on him. So if you look at the title page, you can see. So basically, he has a crown of octopi and then a vest made of fish and seaweed pants and jellyfish boots. So it's basically about a pirate cat who goes sailing around and he catches fish because cats like fish. And then there's this monster. There was a monster in the Briny Deep, Briny Deep, Briny Deep. There was a monster in the Briny Deep and his name was Gazook Gaboot. His tail tossed about with a whip snap flip. Whip snap flip, whip snap flip. His tail tossed about with a whip snap flip and his name was Gazook Gaboot. So here's Gazook Gaboot, and he's kind of crazy. I think it was the combination of the really cool illustrations that I still like and the kind of repetitive nature of the writing. I mean, if you really think about it, for a children's book, this is kind of poetic In an even higher sense, I would say, than Dr. Seuss. His coat was made of misfit fish, misfit fish, misfit fish. His coat was made of misfit fish, and his name was Whiffle Squeek. His boots were made of jellyfish squish, jellyfish squish, jellyfish squish. His boots were made of jellyfish squish, and his name was Whiffle Squeek. This book is also kind of sad and a little scary because Whiffle Squeek is just having a grand old time on the sea, catching all these fish, and then Gazooka Gaboo comes over, and then he starts eating Whiffle Squeek's boots and his vest, and he starts stripping down Whiffle Squeek with his pitchfork tongue, and it's just kind of scary and a little disturbing to read as a child. Like, if you look at this page, Whiffle Squeek looks really freaked out, and this tongue, this pitchfork tongue, is just really weird looking. And then he destroys Whiffle Squeek's boat, and then Whiffle Squeek has to swim back to his home, but then the story does end happily. And Whiffle Squeek goes back home, and then he curls up in the rope and he just falls asleep. But anyway, this book, I totally admit, is kind of scary and pretty creepy, but I really, really like the illustrations, and I really like the way it's written. I mean, that's really pretty, and that's really well done. And now this book is out of print, but if you go on Amazon and look at the price for a new untouched Whiffle Squeek, it's like $2,000. So I'm really happy that my mom did not throw this away, because I still really like this book, and maybe if I'm a horrible person, then I'll read my children this book, and then they can get freaked out, and then it will become one of their favorites as well. So that's all I wanted to share with you guys today, was my 2 favorite children's books when I was growing up. So that's it, and I hope you're having a wonderful April, and I'll see you tomorrow.